John O'Leary, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. I've been fired up all week for this conversation, and I'm sure we're going to get into some very inspirational stuff. I was telling you earlier is that I'm just hoping to stay seated because I'm going to get so fired up. I'm probably going to want to stand up during this at some point. But welcome to the show.
Well, man, on that kind of introduction, I would encourage your audience to remain seated and lower expectations. Okay. So get a big, tall cup of coffee. You will need it for the sleeper of a conversation.
Well, let's start with the story. So you have an incredible book titled On Fire, The 7 Choices to Ignite and Radically Inspire Life. I love this book, man. It's phenomenal. And in order to set the table for the conversation we're going to get into today, John, we first got to go back to when you were 9 years old. You have a very pivotal event in your life. For the listeners that haven't heard your story yet, can you walk us through a little bit of it?
Yeah, sure. And I'll just take a few steps with you. And of course, if you want to know more, just ask. But at an age 9, I was watching some boys in my neighborhood playing with fire and gasoline. And as a kid, man, you try to be like the people you look up to. And I looked up to these kids, DJ. They were 11, I'm 9. And I figured if they could do it, me too. So that weekend, my father was at work and my mother was out with a couple sisters of mine. I had the whole house walk into this garage, lit a piece of cardboard on fire, bent down over a red can of gasoline, try to pour a little bit on top of this flame. You know, it's weird because I'm looking at your face right now, and man, I remember it like it was yesterday. Like what happens next? I saw my little flame get like pulled up into this can, like slow motion. It creates this massive explosion, split the can in two, picked up the kid, and then it launched me 20 feet against the far side of the garage. And I found myself on fire that morning. And as a kid, you're taught stop, drop, and roll, but that's before you find yourself on fire. And so, dude, I looked down at my arms and my body, and everything's orange and red. I wasn't really sure what it even was. And the entire garage was aflame. So I just panicked and I ran. I ran through the flames back into my mom and dad's house. It just kept on going. I ran through the kitchen and through our little family room, stood eventually in the front hall of the house screaming for a hero, just begging for somebody to come save me. And I'll be brief, but I saw my brother Jim coming toward me, and he was 17 when I was 9. And I remember as he's coming toward me, you know, I'm praying for a hero. And then I see him and I'm like, man, anybody else? Like this dude can't fix anything. He's my older brother. He beats up on me. He bullies me. He's never been nice to me. Anybody else? But on that day, January 17th, it was his day. You know, it was his day to shine. And you asked me even before I started in with the interview, like, do you get tired of telling the story? Not at all, because it's not about me. It's about ordinary heroes stepping up and doing the right thing. My brother Jim stepped forward, put out the fire. It took him 3 minutes. He burns himself in the process, picks me up, carries me outside, jumps on top of me, rolls around, runs back into a burning house, gets my other 2 sisters out, gets my dog out, calls 911. 1987, the lifesaver of the year for the state of Missouri was a 17-year-old boy named Jim, my brother, who changed. And that's the invitation in front of us all day long, to embrace the gift and the promise of being used for good.
So you were walking in the house, running into the house, and you were screaming for a hero. There's people out there, John, listening right now that are looking for a hero in their life. And maybe they're expecting it to be somebody, and maybe it's not that person. And you're just saying that sometimes it's the unlikely people that show up to be heroes. What's the advice to people out there that are they're just looking for a hero?
So in my office, I have you're looking at me through 2-dimensional, but on this wall, like behind me is our podcast wall. This is where I have pictures of heroes, pictures of astronauts and mountain climbers, and Travis Thomas, one of our friends, John Gordon, another one of our friends. I know you've had them on the podcast. Over on this other wall, though, it's people of historical value, like the prodigal father. That's pretty historically valuable. Abraham Lincoln, MLK, on and on. But one of the guys is Fred Rogers. Fred's easily scared as a kid. And his mother used to say to Fred, don't look at the scary thing. Look at the people responding to it. Mm. And what media and social media and life has taught us to do is to look for the fire, listen for the shots, and be very scared by what's taking place around us. What Fred's mother brilliantly challenged him to do is, yeah, that's out there. There's reason for fear. There's people letting you down all the time. And like, we don't get there all the time, but there are people moving toward that, trying to make a difference. There are little versions of Jim O'Leary everywhere if your eyes are trained to look for them. So one of the things that I would encourage all of us to do, myself included, is to be actively seeking goodness every day, and don't be at all surprised when you see it. It's everywhere.
Love it. So let's continue the story. So you get into the ambulance, you get rushed to the hospital. John, what happens next?
Yeah, so I'm talking to the guy, but as the doors are shut in the ambulance, my brother Jim tries to get in, and the guy chases him away. And so it's just this strange guy, man, with rusty brown hair and me in the back of this ambulance. I'd never been by myself. I'm only a 9-year-old kid, and I'm scared, and my clothes are burnt off, and my skin's burnt off, and it's a terrifying situation. It's a couple-minute drive to the hospital. We get out of that. They roll me into the ER. A doctor greets me, the nurses start working on me, and then I hear my dad's voice. And man, like, I don't remember, and I'm not just saying this tongue in cheek, I don't have a clue what I had for dinner last night. So my memory is not total recall by a long shot, but there's something about that day, for the first hour of it, at least, that it's just moment by moment, I remember it in great detail. And so I remember, as this nurse is working on me, I hear my father's voice down the hall yelling at some nurse, "Where is my boy John? Where's my boy John?" This lion's roar belts out across the ER. And my dad was a veteran. He's a business owner. He's type A. And I'm 9. I just blew up his house. So I'm assuming the old man has come to finish me off. Like, he's furious. These nurses are wasting their time on me. But one of them brings him back into this room. She pulls back the curtain. My dad walks in. He points down with his index finger, and he says very sternly, "John, look at me when I'm talking to you." And so I look up, and then he goes, "I have never been so proud
Mm,
of anyone in my entire life. And my little buddy, today, this morning, I'm simply proud to be your dad." And then he follows with these words, listeners: "I love you. I love you. I love you. And there is nothing you can do about it."
mm,
And as a little boy, hearing those words, DJ, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like, nobody told my dad what happened. The old man doesn't know I blew up the house. Maybe my brother Jim's painting the house. Maybe his good work for the day is not done yet. What I did not get as a kid was the power of grace and mercy and love to redeem brokenness. And my dad represented that for me that day. And man, that doesn't make months, ultimately 5.5 months in burn care, easy. It doesn't make waking up with like your fingers amputation surgery easy, or lifetimes of walking around with scars easy. But his love on day one made the journey possible. And so you said, John, what happened when you got to the hospital? What happened next? Like, that's the next thing. And then it just kept slowly folding forward, where people just kept showing up for me. And I'll share one more story from that morning. My mother came in, and right before she walks into this room, the doctor pulled her aside and said, "Mrs. O'Leary, you may not want to go in there right now." And she's like, "He's my boy. Of course I'm going in." And he says, "Mrs. O'Leary, you need to know your son has been burned on 100% of his body. 87% of those burns are 3rd degree." And, for my mother, that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So she said, "Doc, are you saying that my baby's only got a 50-50 chance of surviving this?" And he says to her, "No, that's not at all what I'm saying. If I had to put odds on your son's chances of survival, I would say that they are less than 0.5% of surviving the first night, and they'll never go up." So she gets this diagnosis of death. It's important to hear that, because we're getting the diagnosis in the marketplace right now. Like, it's never been worse. More at 10 o'clock tonight on the news. They'll tell you all about how bad the world is. My mother is told that the little boy is going to die. She then walks into this room. She takes my right hand in hers. She pats my bald head, and she says, "Baby, I love you. I just love you." So at this point, like, I'm broken, man. And I say to her, "Mama, knock it off with the love. Am I going to die?" And in that moment, DJ, I'm not looking for honesty. I'm looking for hope. And there's sometimes a difference and a gap between the two. I wanted her to say, "Baby, you're fine. We'll get you out of here this afternoon." And instead, she just gave me truth. And she looked me in the eye, she held my hand in hers, and she said, "Baby, do you want to die? It's your choice. It's not mine." That's bold. And I look back at her and I said, "Mama, I don't want to die. I want to live." And her response was, "Good. Then look at me. You take the hand of God, you walk the journey with him, and you fight like you never fought before. Your father and I will be with you. You're not alone, but do your part. Fight." And on that day, between my dad's grace and my mother's love, a little boy made a commitment to fight on. And this sounds almost like a fable, like, oh, it's a cute story. Well, maybe it's cute, maybe it's inspirational, but it's true. This naked, skinless, dying little boy took the hand of his mother and the hand of God in my faith view and fought, and had no idea what skin grafts would look like or pain might feel like, but we knew the decision to fight on had already been made.
I read this part in your book, John, and I had to read it a couple times, and each time goosebumps, and I had to share it with my wife because bold was the way I described it as well. What a bold response from his mom. I can't believe she said that. But really, it's a launching point in your own life and telling people about, are you really living? The quote in the book I love is, life is not about avoiding death, it's about choosing to really live. And we talked a lot about, there's a difference between what is it, being awake and being fully awake. Talk
Yes.
to me a little bit about that. Talk to me about the launching point, about people don't really live to their fullest.
Well, it comes on the heels of that story you've read called the Jack Bug story. And so can I share a little bit of what he
I
did for me?
love stories, man. Bring it.
So, when my mom left the room, they took me into surgery. And when I woke up from the surgery, I found myself tied down to a hospital bed. I can't move my arms or my legs, not only that day, but for 5.5 months. I'm wrapped in bandages. I've got a trach inserted into my throat, so I can't breathe, eat, drink, or talk. So it's kind of a train wreck of a situation. And one more struggle is my eyes are swollen shut, DJ, so I can't see, but I'm awake and I'm in there. And I barely make it through that first night. And the following day, I'm hanging out in total darkness and in pain and lost and feeling despair. And then the door opens up. And so, like, dude, you asked me, John, do you get tired of telling the story? No, man. Cause, like, oh, I still can't believe all this happened. The following day, it's Sunday morning, my door opens up. I hear footsteps walk in, and then I hear somebody clear their throat and they whisper out these words, "Kid, wake up." And that's not my dad or my mom or some doctor. That's the voice of a guy named Jack Buck. Jack Buck was the broadcaster for the St. Louis Cardinals when I was a little guy. He was the broadcaster for almost 50 years. He was my hero as a little boy. I'd never met him, did not know him, wasn't his neighbor, never thought I would meet him. But on that day, he had heard the night before that a little boy was burned and was going to die. And he showed up the following morning in a stranger's life, walked into that room, stepped into the darkness with me, and uttered those words, "Kid, wake up." And then he says, "Keep fighting. John O'Leary Day at the ballpark will make it all worthwhile. Kid, are you listening? Wake up. Keep fighting." He steps out of that room. He leaves me utterly changed, like just filled with hope. And hope does matter, man. Hope matters big time. Having a goal to move toward in your life is a really important thing to have for your life. And the belief, the agency to think you can actually get there. So Jack has just given me that hope, and that's a big deal. He walks out of that room, is told by the staff the little boy is going to die. And then amazingly and shockingly and brilliantly, the following day, this man comes back into my life and says it again. "Kid, wake up. You are going to live. You're going to survive. Keep fighting. John O'Leary Day at the ballpark will make it all worthwhile." And if your podcast was 24 hours instead of just, a little bit shorter than that, we could just slow play this thing. But this man came into my life every day for 5.5 months,
Wow.
encouraging and guiding and loving and casting a vision of possibility for tomorrow. All of it, though, grounded on this idea of wake up, wake up. I think Jack wasn't only alluding to the idea that this little poor kid's eyes are swollen shut. It was also this idea that you can be spiritually asleep. You can be relationally asleep. You mentioned already with me offline and now online about your wife. don't confuse like being married with being fully engaged in that partnership. Like all in, dude. I said I do, and I'm still saying I do. I still am wild about you. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing it. We think love is just kind of a passive verb. It's not. It's active present tense. Jack was challenging me to wake up, to engage again, to do my part. And in the book, when I talk about waking up, that's the idea there too. Just because we're alive doesn't mean we are fully alive. Just because we're out of bed doesn't mean we're fully engaging in the day ahead of us.
I would love to read this part because the book is just so dang good. It says, "Are you truly alive?" No, I didn't just ask, "Are you breathing?" I'm not asking if you have a pulse or are existing or enduring. No, I want you to know if you are really living. Do you feel excited about your life? Like you are present for each moment, big and small. Like you can handle the challenges that come, embrace the opportunities before you, and be fully satisfied in any situation. Are you living a radically inspired life? If not, it's time to discover the power of taking ownership of your life. Regardless of the challenges you face today, this is a choice that ignites within us the power to surrender to things we can't change, fight for the things we can, and celebrate each moment on the journey going forward. Life is not about avoiding death, it's about choosing to really live. Here is your inflection point. No more, it's not my fault. Embrace the freedom of it's my life because this is your life. This is your time. This is your moment. This matters. Act like it. Choose to own it. Now, you describe love it, right? Love
Dude,
you.
like honestly, I wrote that book, came out in 2016, but you write things like 2 years before it. So like 2014. So you're reading me words. Believe it or not, I have 4 kids. I don't read On Fire to my kids each night. Okay. I'm not sure any of them have ever read a page of On Fire. They're not all that impressed by their dad. But I hear you say those words. And dude, they're just true. They're just true. And I think everybody knows it to be true. And now all of us recognize we've missed out on that opportunity of fully engaging in life, including the guy you're interviewing today.
Behind you, you have heroes behind your camera screen. Behind mine, I have a poster that I've made myself and says, "Life is not a dress rehearsal." For me,
Yeah.
it's just a reminder that we don't get two chances at this on earth, maybe somewhere else, hopefully, but we get one opportunity, one crack at this. And that's my daily reminder. I'm curious, John, for the people out there listening, maybe they're not on the same wavelength as you or I are yet. They're struggling with some of this stuff on fully living, or they don't know, I don't know, am I fully living? Am I not? What's the advice to them? What do you tell them?
So I had an early morning meeting with a friend. We met at 6 o'clock for coffee, and we met at a park bench. And I brought the coffee, and he brought the tears. This is a fellow going through some struggles right now, and he said something to the effect of, "I'm just bored by life. I'm just
Mm,
bored by it all."
mm,
And we were in this park, this very super hilly area, part of Missouri. The birds were singing. Quite literally, the sun was cast, like just rising over this one hill in the distance. And it was this most sacred moment. And so we started talking about the sanctity, the gift of life. And then there's a study I bumped into a couple of years ago about how unlikely it is we are alive. Like, what is the chance that your mother and your father met? We take our own life for granted all the time. We're mad about the Starbucks coffee being served wrong because we asked for cream, not milk. Like, please, have you ever really thought about how unlikely it is you are alive? And so I'm going to let your listeners think about that for a moment. What's the chance of your mother and father meeting in the first place? What's the likelihood that Neil Diamond was playing in the background, Sweet Caroline, and mom had had just one glass of wine, but it was enough? And like, what is the chance that all that came together, boom, right on time for your life, the life that we're bored by? And the scientific evidence is this: if you take what your father brings to the table genetically and then your mother genetically, you have a 1 in 400 trillion chance of being here. You got a 1 in 400 trillion chance. It's far likelier to multiply the likelihood of winning the lottery in your state many times over than you being born. And that doesn't even say, well, what about their parents and their parents and then life itself on earth? So, one way for me to get out of bed and be awake is to recognize the divinity, the sanctity, the majesty of life. It is shocking. It is shocking. So, I invite you, if you're not there right now, grab a cup of water, go outside and just look up. Whether you look up through a telescope or down through a little microphone, magnifying glass. You're going to be overwhelmed by what you see in front of you. So that's one way to no longer be bored by the gift that is all around you.
Love it. Second chapter is about what are you hiding? Stop pretending and begin to see the miracle of your life. We're already kind of talking about this already, John, about stepping out, looking about what's around you. You say the quote, living life on fire means you aren't afraid to know and own your story. You celebrate the scars you've accumulated along the way, and you're ready and willing to live life honestly. Talk to me about what hiding meant for you in your story.
Yeah. So when you're 9 years old and you come home from hospital, the dream is not to be on DJ's podcast or write a book or be a speaker or have your own podcast. My dream was to be ordinary. And when you don't have fingers and you have scars from your neck to your toes and you walk with a limp and your arms are stuck at about 90 degrees, you're the biggest fraud in the room because you're trying to be ordinary in every room you walk into, but it's absolutely an impossibility. So what I did to be ordinary is I tried to be more of what everybody else already was. In grade school, try to be funnier than everybody else was. High school and college, try to drink and party and laugh a little bit more and louder than everybody else did. Afterwards, trying to achieve even greater success than anybody else did. And even DJ, if you think about the job that I took on, man, I worked construction for almost 10 years. I got no fingers, man. Like, this is the worst job in the world. And it's only in hindsight that it makes sense to us why we do the things we did. But for me, it was my way of climbing a ladder, looking out of the world that wasn't even looking toward me in the first place and saying, people, look at me. Aren't I ordinary? Am I enough now? Look at me. Look at all the things I can do. And it was just this lie. And what changed, it was three things in a row, like one boom, boom. I was in a church service and the pastor talked about using your talents for good. Whether you have five, two, or one, use your talents for good. And I'm not articulate, as your listeners already know, and I'm not being funny. Like, I've said the wrong word several times. I dangle prepositions. I mutter. So I don't say the right stuff. I got decent grades, like C's. Okay, that's what got me through grade school, high school, and college. Barely made it out. Didn't have a ton of friends. Didn't have a lot of money. Like, just ordinary. So I viewed myself as having one talent. But the pastor eventually came to us with one talent, and maybe that's you, DJ, and maybe it's some of your listeners. And he said, and for those of you who feel like you have one talent, listen to me clearly. You are a precious, priceless gift. Say yes to being used for good. Uh, that's good. Like, we all should meet at a tattoo parlor this afternoon and get that on our right bicep. You are a priceless, precious gift. Say yes to being used for good. So that's Sunday. 2 days later, I'm working construction. My phone rings and a Girl Scout says, Mr. O'Leary, would you speak at my school? She calls my phone. And I'd never told friends or guys that were on my construction crew what happened to me. Why would you talk about the bad? But on that day, on my flip phone with the little girl on the earpiece, I uttered back the word Travis Thomas loves, yes, yes. So I said yes. And hung up the phone, immediately regretted it, practiced my talk for 40 hours, gave this first speech, an 8-minute belly flop, man. It was not strong at all. I talked primarily about Abraham Lincoln and his failures in life, and then just had a couple sentences on some of my failures. And on the walk out that day, a dad said to me, one of the room dads, John, that was awesome. Would you speak at Rotary? And so I said, yes, which is the response to opportunity of serving in life, of being used for good, of recognizing, yeah, you, listener, that you are a priceless, precious gift. Say yes to being used for good. So I said yes. One of those guys was in Kiwanis, yes. And as I told this story, not only was I able to tell it more frequently and more boldly to the audiences, I was able to live it out to the reflection in the mirror, eventually recognizing that this brokenness is beautiful when it's redeemed. The scars exist because the wounds have healed. Like, that's true physically for us have been burned, or maybe you've had a heart surgery and you got a big old scar across your chest. Also, for those of us who've made mistakes in our relationships. My friend today, who was crying with me at 6 o'clock, has just recently made a big mistake. And so we're crying about that scar together. The scars exist because the wounds have healed.
Mm.
So I would encourage us to recognize you don't need to take your story and become a speaker. but embracing your story and learning the lessons from that story, it allows you to grow in compassion, in empathy, and also in vibrancy for the gift of your life.
Let me take you back to page 57. What's your story? Not the one you share at cocktail parties, not what's printed on your resume or the one you feature on your online profile. It's time to drop the act and take off the mask. It's time to dare to believe that who you are underneath is enough, because it is. My challenge to you is, as you look in the mirror at your reflection, at your day, at your life, to confidently recognize that you and your story are priceless. This
Mm,
time, don't cover up, but marvel. No one else has your story, your scars, or your wisdom. No one. Embrace them, accept them, learn from them, and celebrate them. You wouldn't be here without them. Your reflection may be a bit red, bumpy, ridgy, but it's led you perfectly to where you are today and the possibility of what you can do next. So rip off the bandages, take off the mask, look in the mirror, love what you see, smile at the reflection, and share it with others. Choose self acceptance.
mm. That's good. Dude, whoever ghost wrote this thing is awesome, man. Those are powerful words.
I love it. The next one that I really want to get into is being all in. So we talk about this liberated life, right? So do you want to die and stepping forward? And the next one is though is are you all in? Because we can put one foot in and we can kind of play that game, John, a little bit. But what you're asking listeners to do is to get all in, put both feet in, just like your brother Jim did when he saved you.
Mm. Well, down on the heels of Jim saving me, because as powerful as that story is, I don't think you and I are talking today if it wasn't for the two stories that followed it. So I mentioned that I was searching and praying for a hero that day, and Jim was a version of it, but we needed others. We always need others. And so he got me into the front yard, calls 911, and that's when the two heroes show up. And so I want you guys at home, and ladies at home, and leaders at home, while you're driving, walking the dog, working out, imagine in your mind's eye what those heroes look like. Okay, you got them? Okay. So let me tell you about the first hero. She, I don't know if you were expecting that pronoun. She was 11. She had blondish hair. She had been sleeping upstairs the morning that I blew the house up. She comes outside in a nightgown. It's frigid outside. There's snow on the ground, and she sees her brother in the front yard bent over with no clothes and no skin on. And I don't know what you would do, DJ, man. I would have taken off running, maybe to a neighbor's house. That's me. I'm not all in, certainly not at that age. My brave, bold sister, Amy, 11 years old, comes directly to me, puts her arms around me, just pulls me in close. And she says, John, everything's okay. Have faith and fight. The best is yet to come. And overhearing this, like I'm hearing what she's saying, but while she's talking, I'm looking down and I'm seeing my legs all burnt up and my hands all burnt up and my like it's all bad. And when I finally had the audacity to look up, I see my house on fire. And I recognize not only did I do the damage to my body, I did the damage to the house, and I've got to pay for that. And it's just like, it just all collapses on me in that moment. So I say to my sister, Amy, it's not okay. Do me a favor. And this is going to be hard for some of your listeners to hear. Do me a favor, go back into the house. I don't care if it's on fire. I want you to get me a knife, come back outside and kill me, because I'm not okay. And neither is this thing. And that's when she pulls me in even tighter. And she says, John, what's wrong with you? Have faith and fight. The best is yet to come. She saw my dad in the emergency room that afternoon. And she said to him, Daddy, John felt so hot when I held him in the front yard that I knew I was burning my arms through my nightgown. And then she says, but Daddy, I never let go. And that is how it went down. This little girl, 11 years old. You talk about being all in. I mean, we think we're like, dude, I'm all in, man. I'm getting to work early. Like, she is burning herself through her nightgown, and she's not going to let go until the paramedics show up with the ambulance. All in. That is all in. That is sacrificial living right there. But I mentioned that there were two heroes in the front yard besides my brother. So you had them both in your mind's eye earlier. The first one probably surprised you. The second one will probably surprise you even more. She is 7. She is named Susan, and she sleeps upstairs with my sister Amy because they are sisters. Susan's my little sister. She comes outside. She is chased out there because of the smoke and the heat and the flames. Here's the conversation that's taking place in the front yard. I want a knife. And she goes back into a burning house. And I think it's one of the most remarkable stories I've ever heard on sacrificial living and loving. She goes back into a kitchen, can't see, reaches up blindly, grabs what she came in there for, comes racing back outside. I'm in the front yard being held, being encouraged. Then we see my sister Susan coming toward us. Her face is dark now with ash, with soot, tears coming over those big fat cheeks. And then she pauses for a moment before she throws a cup of water right into my face. DJ, I want to die, man. And this little girl who hears that I want to die goes back into a house, not for a knife to finish me off, but for water to save me. And after she throws the first cup of water in my face, she goes right back into a burning house, gets a second cup of water, comes racing back outside, throws it in my face. And then she turns, wheels, runs back in and gets a third, runs back outside, throws it right into my face. I'm burned for my entire body. 87% of it is third degree. But she, the doctors say, is why my face is not, and she is why my scalp is
Wow.
not. And that is where they took all the skin from my entire body from.
Wow.
So when you talk about heroism, and like, John, are there still examples of heroes out there? Yeah, dude, everywhere, everywhere. I saw three that day in the front yard, my brother, my sister, and then I saw the paramedics, more examples. And then I saw the ER doc, and then I saw the team, and then I saw my dad, and then I saw my mom, and then Jack Buck. Like, they're everywhere. My problem with the social media and media is they are focused on the anti-hero. They are focused on what people are doing wrong, and they celebrate that story. They are buying clicks. They are trading in fear, and it is driving us crazy toward hatred and death. I'm serious about this. So turn off the news, cancel your social media feeds, and open up your eyes. You will see examples all around you, people who are all in. And then your job, family, is to be an example for them. You don't need to go into a burning house, but you can hold the door open. You can give her a tip when she says, would you like to leave a tip on that? You're like, dude, you tip at Home Depot now? What the? Yeah. How about you? Be generous. Go first. Trade in love. Watch what happens.
You have a line in the book. I really like the last four words. It says, "To live a radically inspired life, you must choose to go all in each day with a purpose greater than yourself." So sometimes I get people, John, that say, I'm struggling finding my purpose in life. I don't really have a purpose, and they think that the purpose is their job. And usually that's not the case. But the last three words are so crucial. They speak to me a lot. Greater than yourself. It's something beyond you. And
Right.
when we're talking about our purpose here, it's not ourselves. And your stories exemplify that. We are going all in on others.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought up purpose. We think purpose is like getting the right job that fills our bucket, our calling. And I hate to keep going back to the 6 a.m. conversation, but it's you and I are on the heels of it, and it's relevant not only to him, but I think to us collectively. I challenged my friend to be used for good, to make himself not ultimately worthy of love and worthy of the right job and worthy of the income that he's striving for, make himself worthy. And so the homework assignment for him, and if it was good enough for him, a dear friend of mine, it's good enough for us, was to come up with his own purpose statement. So he asked the question, how? So I said, hey, buddy, do this. Ask yourself the question, why will you thrive? Why will you do great things? Why will you be used for good? And then answer it with a statement. I choose to thrive. I choose to do great things. I choose to be used for good because. Okay. So I'm going to have a little in-class exercise. Write down that I choose to thrive because. And he's got that work to do, but I've already done it. So here's my mission statement, and you'll hear very little about podcasting or book sales or speaking or money. But I'll tell you, being clear on my purpose has led to those things. And I will do the same in your life, whatever the goal is you have for your life. The reason I choose to thrive is because God demands it. My family deserves it. The world is starved for it. Let's roll. No excuses. So that's man, DJ, that's why I get up early. That's why I stay up late. That's why I'm all in for life, because I'm super clear on purpose. I choose to thrive because God demands it. Family deserves it. The world is starved for it. Let's roll. No excuses.
I got goosebumps, and you can feel that just from just from going back and forth with you, man. I can feel that. That's authentic. The line in the book that really exemplifies that is, "When you know your why, you can endure any how."
That's Viktor Frankl, man. Just so you know, all there he does is steal from others and acts like he's smart. I've done nothing on my own, and one of the things that keeps me humble is the truth behind that statement. Like the reason I can write is because therapists push my arms together through scar tissue. Like anything I've been able to do is because someone took me by the hand and said, let's do it together.
Mhm.
Look what you can do next. Everything, including that book, including that beautiful quote. That's not me. That's not my brilliance. Viktor Frankl survives the Holocaust. You and I are all going through hardship right now, but my gosh, the Holocaust, he lost everybody and everything dear to him. Came out, wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and in that book, penned that sentence you just quoted back to me. When you know your why, you can endure anyhow. And we are so focused on what's in it for us. Where's my part? What do I get out of this? I've been victimized by my parents, by my birthright, by someone not being there for me, by someone letting me down, by the diagnosis, by the scars, by the I'm the victim here. What Frankl reminds us is when you know your why, you can endure anyhow, all the adversity, all the struggles, those you were born into and those that others caused into your life, maybe those that you chose through omission and commission that are now part of your life. But we got to know the why. The work to get there is important. And if you're looking for a specific takeaway from this podcast, it might be spend some time today and design yours. It is worthy of that investment.
I hope you don't mind me keep going back to the book continuously here, but page 93 to close up the purpose. Are you on fire with purpose today? I'm not asking when you last ran into a burning building or risked your life for someone else. I want you to know, are you living as if it matters? As if something significant is at stake in your life today? Are you all in? Or have you allowed indifference to slowly steal all your joy? Are you letting the mundane, the ordinary, the challenging, the boring suck from the marrow from your life? Let this be your inflection point. Choose to live on fire means you are unwilling to accept okay. You can continue to retreat, protect yourself, disengage, and pretend not to care. You can certainly cross your arms and say, so what? I can't be bothered. So what? I'm done caring. So what? It doesn't matter. Or you can step back into the fight. You can engage in the world around you, find your purpose, and cling to it with all your might. You can proudly proclaim, so what that it sometimes burns, it's worth it. So what, I might get hurt, there are other people that I can inspire. So what that it's hard, I've got one life and I plan to never let go. In choosing to be on fire with purpose, you might just save a life, maybe even your own.
Mm.
Choose purpose.
So people sometimes ask me why I do the work I do, and it is to save one life. It's why because I'm a homebody. I'm an introvert. I'm lazy naturally, and I don't like bright lights. And yet, whether it's on a podcast or on a big stage, you're forced to do all the things you don't like. So then the question ought to be, well, then why? Why in the world? Last year in the United States, 1.4 million Americans attempted suicide. And that breaks me, man. And if there's something we can do that reminds people of the dignity of their life, that they have royal blood coursing through their veins, that they're called to greatness, not success, not money, maybe not a big old beach house, but you're called to greatness. You're called to be used for good. That is so worthy and it's so good and it's so life affirming. So again, you're reading back to me a book that I had a hand in writing, but it's been a while since I've heard it the way you're saying it to me. And yeah, we will save a life when we live on fire for it. And it might indeed be yours.
I would love to spend some time in the next chapter because I think this is really even more applicable to people that probably aren't listening to this podcast, but usually it's John. It's, I know somebody like this. So, chapter 4 is why are you in jail? And this is really talking about the victim mindset. There's several stories in the book. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to tell me about Put the Fork Down. I think this was just such, this embodies the victim mindset. Let's dive into not only if the listeners are struggling with victim mindset, but if they're struggling with somebody close to them, has that victim mindset. How do you handle that? How do you deal with that? But maybe first we start with that great story.
Hmm. So it's a great story. And again, okay, let me back into it by saying this. When they produced On Fire, when they created the cover art, there was a picture of me wearing a tie on the front of it with my arms crossed, shoulders back, hair polished, almost like, reader, look at me. Look at my greatness. So I wrote back and I'm like, hey guys, before you do the cover art, read the book, because this book is not about me. And so when you look at On Fire today, you see these, it's called foil wrapping letters.
Mhm.
It actually gives off light. And if you look closely enough, you can almost make out your image. So
Mhm.
the image is not mine, it's DJ's staring right back at him. Because what we wanted to do is to make sure as people got through this book, they recognize the hero ultimately is not John or John's heroes, but it's the reader. And it's your call toward greatness in the lives of others as you serve, as you engage, as you go all in. And so the story you asked about is one more example, not John doing something great, but someone else forcing him to. And here we go. I come home from the hospital. I'm 9. I'm broken, but I'm home. 5.5 months after I left in the hospital, I'm brought back in a station wagon. They have a big old party for me that day. And then my mother makes dinner for me that night. And the struggle was I had no fingers and can't do anything. So I'm a victim to my circumstances. And I knew it. Like, my life is kind of over. I'll live it out here at home, but I can't do anything. So my mother makes dinner. She sets it in front of me. We say our prayer. Everybody else grabs the fork. I can't. So I wait to have my sister Amy, who does it because she's an awesome lady. She grabs a fork. She scoops a potato. She brings them toward my mouth. And then my mother says the words, Amy, drop the fork. If John is hungry, he will feed himself. And I looked at my mom like shocked, because look at me, I'm a victim. Mom, look, I'm in a wheelchair, I'm on morphine, I'm still wrapped in bandages, and I have no fingers. I can't do anything by myself. So I said that. And she looked at Amy and said, Amy, baby, if he's hungry, he's feeding himself tonight. And this is, I'm emotional about to unpack this part. Dinner at our house is about 10 to 15 minutes typically. That night it was 2.5 hours. The first 2 hours and 20 minutes was me flipping the plate and crying and sad and mad and a whole lot of other words I won't use on your podcast. But about 2 hours, 20 minutes into, a little boy finally figured out how to wedge a fork between his two fingerless, broken, stupid, useless hands. That's how I viewed them. Wedge it into a potato. It's now plate number 3 I'm working on because the other 2 are in the dog's belly. Scooped up the potatoes, moved them toward my mouth, got the food in, started chewing. The entire time looking at my mother with great hatred. But DJ, I was eating. And after I took that first bite, I took a second one and then a third one. And I never again, after that dinner, waited for my sister to feed me. And I'm not against asking for help. But I think so frequently in life, we chalk up, hey, I've never been good at that. I'm not a good speaker. I've never been attractive. I've never been good with money. I'm just not good with money. I've always been a smoker. It's how I deal with my anxiety. All this crap. And it's just who we are. Well, that night, my mother blew that at my face and said, you're so much more, but you need to reveal it to yourself. No one else can do it for you. You got to reveal that one for yourself. And that day, she didn't teach me how to eat. She taught me how to live. And that is a gift. So my mother is one of my many heroes, but she's mighty.
In your book, you talk about in that chapter the victim versus the victor. And the victim, you say their favorite question is, why me? And I could not agree more. Why did they say that? And what does that mean?
Well, we hinted at it a moment ago. Why was I born into this family? Why do I have these struggles? Why did I get burned? Why did my parents get divorced? Why does my father have Parkinson's disease? Why did my dog die? Why did that girl walk out on me? All these why me's. Why was my flight delayed? Why was the coffee served with cream rather than milk? Why me? Why me? Very self-focused, very helpless. It's learned helplessness ultimately, though. So that's a common question that we ask in society, and it ultimately doesn't empower us to take the next right step forward. It's popular, but it's not helpful.
Curious then, what would be So I have a ranking where I teach my kids on the mindset hierarchy, and on the bottom is the victim. It goes victim, and then pessimist, then optimist, and then realist, and then the top is a curious mindset, asking questions. One of your favorite words, also one of my favorite words. If we were to go polar opposites here, so if the victim really likes to say, "Well, why me?" What would the opposite look like then? What's a healthier, growth minded type of question that we can maybe start to recommend?
I think you're painting me into the corner because you know where the thing goes, but it's the exact same question. It is the question, why me? And back to your hierarchy, rather than asking it as the victim does naturally, why me? Eeyore, why me? It is through this curious heart of wonder for life. Of John, did you really tell me earlier I had a 1 in 400 trillion chance of being born, and it happened? And that same truth plays out for my parents and grandparents and millennia leading into, like, wow, why me? What's the freaking chance? And regardless of where you think the life came from or the universe came from, whether you think a divine creator spoke and life leapt into existence, or you think there was some cosmic accident, 7.2 billion years ago, and boom, either way, we should be in awe of this thing that happened that triggered for the set of events that led to life today. And so the question is, again, why me? Oh, why me?
Mm.
But this one ought to be asked through that curious, open-minded heart of profound awe, wonder, and vibrancy for the life we have.
There's a study that really perked my ears because I live in Minnesota. I'm going to read it real quick because I think this is really fits into what we're talking about. In 1986, researchers at the University of Minnesota began an experiment that soon came to be known as the Nun Study. Nuns were considered a good population to study because, due to the strict regimen of their cloistered life, their lives had fewer variables than the general population. Think about it. Due to their vows, these women lived similar lives, eat similar meals, work similar hours under similar circumstances. In looking for a homogeneous group, this is about as good as it gets. In this experiment, the researchers investigated and reviewed the journals and lives of 180 nuns from the Sisters of Notre Dame in Milwaukee. The researchers wondered if attitude and longevity in life were related. Sifting through the pages in the nuns' journals, the researchers tracked positive and negative comments. Entries such as, "The food here stinks," was counted as negative. Conversely, "Grateful for another night of beans and rice," was marked as positive. So, was there any connection? Did it matter the way they asked the question, why me? Did attitude impact longevity? Did gratitude actually matter? What do you think? Careful research revealed that 34% of those who were least cheerful in their journaling were alive at age 85. Not bad. Until you compare it to those who were most positive. A stunning 90% of the nuns whose statements were most cheerful were still alive at age 85. A decade later, 54% of the most cheerful were still alive at age 94, compared to only 11% of the least cheerful. The numbers were staggering. The researchers looked for other factors that could explain this: how devout the nuns were, how intellectual they are, how physically active they were. But only one factor clearly predicted the length and the vitality of life: the amount of positive or negative feelings expressed.
Mm.
This is big.
It, on many levels. I'm not a big lifelong guy. Like I don't know if I'll get 100 years or not even see my birthday in August. I don't know, but I want good years. I want good days. I want to be used for good. And so for me, that's part of that attitude study is they showed up differently than the other ladies in this case. They were all nuns. The other piece is this, and the Harvard longevity study is all about this. It's about relationships. But ultimately, who do you want to be in a healthy relationship with? A cynic, a negative person, someone who tells you how crappy Trump and Biden and Obama and Bush and Clinton and Bush and Reagan go all how crappy everything is. That's one way to do it. Or do you want to be in a relationship with a person who's like, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's good, man. It's good. Spring is here. Let's roll. So attitude in part informs how you show up. So I think that's part of why the longevity was there. But the other part the study did not unpack as clearly, but I think it should have, is how relationally attractive they are. We want to do life with those people. We want to sit at their feet while they eat their dinner. We want to be with them in the journey forward in life. And that is a huge indicator on how successful we become, how significant we become, how joyful we are, and how many years we have. So if you want better relationships, you're in a marriage, so am I. If you want a better marriage, if you want to impact more lives professionally, attitude. It's one thing you have complete control over, how you decide to show up.
So broad question here, and it could be tough to answer, very situational. But what about the people that, John, we work with certain people that we don't have the choice on, and at a certain, some might say at a certain point, you can't, you choose who you marry, but after 15 years, this is where you're at. I'm really trying to think about the people who are surrounded by victims and they don't really have a choice. They have to go to work. This is who they work next to. How do you handle, or we have a lot of coaches that listen. Their clients might feel like they're the victim. What's the cue? What's the coaching? What's the takeaway for people that feel like they are surrounded by victims, other than stop surrounding yourself with victims? How do you work with people like that?
Yeah. Well, I think your first part of the answer is the first one that you need to write down.
Mhm,
Don't work with people like that.
mhm.
Don't play golf with people like that. Don't sit in the same pew with people like that. Don't go to AA with people like that. So change your lane, which leads to the second step too, which is this one. You mentioned marriage, children, parents. We spend the majority of our lives trying to change others. And as I'm getting a little bit more seasoned, I'm finally letting go of that one. In loving the one in front of you as they are, they begin to become more like you. You become more attractive to be followed, like they want to follow you. And when we find ourselves always critiquing coworkers and presidents and wives and parents and neighbors and everybody else, we become miserable. We become the very thing that we hate and the one we're judging. So what I would encourage our people to do who are struggling with others who are negative is that's them. Don't be swallowed up by that pessimism, by that negativity, by that cynicism. That's them doing their life. Our job is to lead ours, stay in our circle, focus on what matters most, take the next right step forward. That's what we have control over. And then as you try to love those ones, because maybe it's a child and she's just always, depression's different. So I'm not going to go clinically on depression or bipolar here. That's a completely different, important conversation. If we're just talking about, life's crappy. Okay. That's something we can have a conversation around. So that's when I would encourage us to say, what if we kept a list every day of what we're grateful for? What I learned from it was a billionaire that I worked with out of North Dakota, and he had 3 awesome kids. So I asked him years ago, why are your kids so good, man? Dang. Like, just, they're not arrogant. They don't think it's about them. Like, what did you do? And he thought, and he said, John, I don't know what I did. One thing I did was this. And so, by the way, I've been doing this exercise with my kids for 8 years. So it had an impact on me, and God willing, it's having an impact on my kids. He said, every night when I tuck them in, I ask them 4 questions. What was the best part of your day? And what was the worst part of your day? Because we don't want to be Pollyanna here. There were struggles. So they know every night they're going to be asked for the highlight and the low light. And then the next 2 questions are really important. What was one kind thing someone did for you today? And what was one kind thing you did for someone else today? And he said to me, John, they knew every single day I was not going to let them go to bed until they answered those 4 questions. So all day long, they were looking for evidence of people doing kind things for them, and they were looking for opportunities to be kindness for others. You stack enough of those days into weeks, into months, and into years, and you change a child's life. So for those of us who are raising children, or you're married to a child, some of us are, what if we did that exercise together? Have a glass of wine and say, baby, what was the best part of your day? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, but what was hard about it? Oh, dude, that sucks. What was one kind? Imagine the conversations, and then imagine writing that down. Imagine tracking your life for a year. For the accountants in the room, you track miles driven. For the salespeople, you track calls. For the coach, you got a lot of coaches. You track reps around the track, or you track how many calls you have with clients. Like, you track that stuff, but you don't track your life.
Mm,
Track your life. And in addition to that, if you have a child, imagine keeping a sacred journal for a child for a year.
mm,
DJ's 7th year.
mm,
And every night, DJ answers the question, best part, worst part, kindness received, kindness given. And his dad is tracking that. And when DJ turns 8, he gets this journal.
mm. Cool.
Or imagine when DJ graduates high school And he thinks, my dad's a jackass, wasn't there for me that one softball game 6 years ago. He never even loved me. And you bring these things to bear and you say, baby, not only was I there for you, I'm wild about you.
Mm.
And your life is good, and so are you. So there's a lot of ways to pivot negativity, but the most important is to make sure you control what you can and let go of what you can't. And if you're trying to change everybody else, you're going to find yourself unsuccessful in it.
And sometimes I think, John, we're tracking the wrong things in life, right? We're tracking the accolades, we're tracking the salary, we're tracking the numbers, and when we really want to improve on something and gain better relationships with people, we're not tracking that stuff as well.
Correct.
Mm.
And I would imagine you as a leader in life track life. And I would imagine the majority of your listeners do as well. I beg you, whether it's that little exercise or a gratitude journal, or you wrap up each day by saying, and one thing I'll do for someone tomorrow is, um, I, there's just so many things you can do where you are intentionally tracking your life and doing tomorrow better than you did yesterday. And back to the billionaire's take on it, you stack enough of those days, watch out.
I'm going to close down with this last half a page. I think it would be a good place to end. Victim versus victor. Why me? A simple question with profoundly important consequences. Storms will always rage, as a victim will stare up at the sky, lift our hands in despair, and cry, why me? We realize clearly that our life is a struggle and others are evil, that there's no hope, and that the worst days are to come. Or we choose another way. In the middle of the same storm, we can choose to be a victor, to recognize that a disease is a gift. The walls can't contain our spirit. The fire has refined and strengthened our character, and the best days are in front of us. We lift our hands, feel the rain on our face, and dance. Why me? We know this is leading us somewhere. We know that this storm isn't the end. We're just waiting for the first sunbeam. Why me? The manner in which we ask this question changes everything that happens afterwards. Choose wisely, choose to be a victor.
Hmm. And let me just break it down because it sounds so coachy and lame. Like, oh, great. Dude, you don't know my life. You don't know my singleness. You know my addiction. You don't know where I am. So let me just share the story. It's tucked into that chapter, but it's when I found myself literally in a jail. And I I shared the story of my father with these inmates. I was at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. It's a max security federal prison, and these are lifers. These guys are never coming out. So if you feel like you're in jail, these guys literally are, and they're never leaving it. So I shared the story of my dad and his Parkinson's disease and his in spite of that disease, his joy for life, and talked about how he's got this constant draw toward gratitude. So I invited them to think of their own list, specifically of what they're grateful for of being at Fort Leavenworth. It's kind of a weird coaching question. Because of the misery of this situation, what are you grateful for? And while they journaled, I gave them 3 minutes. I went over to an old upright piano and I played on it. And I have no fingers, but I can play the piano. Thank you, Mom, for that. So I'm gently playing the piano for them, either Amazing Grace or Memories or some song from Coldplay or who knows. But something's going on in front of them lightly. And then I come back 3 minutes later and I say, guys, who wants to share? Who wants to go first? Nobody. I'm like, come on, guys, come on, come on. So eventually somebody raises his hand and says, man, I'll share. So he grabs this old piece of paper that he'd been writing on. He looks down at his notes and he reads this word for word. As a result of being at Fort Leavenworth prison, I am grateful for not one damn thing. And then he scrumbled up this paper and he threw it at me. There were about 100 guys in this room and everybody started laughing, including me. And then I'm like, dude, well done, well played. Anybody else? Anybody else? And there was a guy in the back of the room who stood and said, man, I'll share. And this guy had kind of almost like a short hair in the front, long in the back, rusty colored, orange jumpsuit, skinny guy. He reads his list and it says, as a result of being at Fort Leavenworth, I am grateful for air in the summer, heat in the winter. Never had either of those things growing up, John. Then he said, 3 square meals. I went most days without meals growing up, John. He talks about the ability that he learned in this prison to read. So he came into an adult prison without being able to read. He learned how to read here. Then he talked about the gift of his GED. He talked about access to the library daily and access to the internet weekly, chance of forgiveness, chance of redemption, hour outside every day. He went on, I don't have the list in front of me right now, 43 items on his list. When he was done, he sat down, the room was quiet, and then you heard this clapping.
Mm.
Every single guy in that room stood up and they started applauding. I have goosebumps right now. When the first men mocked the exercise, why me? What a bunch of crap this is. And he was right, because the way you feel about your life is the life that you're going to live. He was right. And everybody laughed at and with him. When the second guy stood up, everybody quite literally applauded and stood for him. Same prison, same jumpsuit, same life sentence, same crappy, tall, thick walls they're never leaving from. Completely different attitude on asking that question, completely different outcome in doing so. So as you leave this podcast today, if you want to stay in jail, have at it. The media, Fox and MSNBC and CNN will back you up on that. Your friends on social media will back you up on that. Your neighbor will tell you how lousy your nation is and how broken your community is and how unfair life is. Or you look down, shut your eyes, look at that sunrise, think about the gifts you have, take inventory, be renewed, fill that bucket up, ask the question, why me? Answer it boldly, and then spend the day being used for good in service to others. Your choice. And the choice you make influences not only your world, but the world. It's a big deal. So I'm pretty passionate about this work because I look at the headlines like everybody else, and it just breaks me. But Fred Rogers is right. When everybody else is talking about the fires or the war or the shootings, look for evidence of heroes. You will find them. And then your job is to celebrate them and become like them.
John O'Leary, ladies and gentlemen, how can my listeners support you? The book is phenomenal. I truly, truly believe it. I read a lot of books, but man, this is a phenomenal book. So, On Fire, The Seven Choices to Ignite a Radically Inspired Life. Get this anywhere. Other than this, John, how can my listeners support you?
Live it, man. So I know this is my time to like do the commercial, but the most important thing for me is that you hear something in here that maybe moved you and that you take away one idea. And maybe it's gratitude, maybe it's reaching out, maybe it's the mission statement. I choose to thrive because. If you want to get the book, great. If you want to learn more about our work, you can Google John O'Leary or visit me at johnolearyinspires.com. And there you'll find the book and you'll find our podcast and our social media and my phone number and our email and the commitment that if we can ever be of service to you, the answer is yes. Like we're in this thing together, and we're trying to build a tribe of people who are becoming better in order to serve others. There's a lot of successes out there. A lot of folks are trying to, climb high. And if that's you, I'm good for you. I want to become better so I can be used for others. And if you're like that too, man, join me online and let's see what we can do together.
John, you're the man. Thanks for your time today.
DJ, thank you. Great job.